West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Now to the long-awaited book from two outstanding Washington Post Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists. I Alone Can Fix It, Donald J. Trump's catastrophic final year, is out today, and it details the chaos that started with the coronavirus and ended with the insurrection of the Capitol on January 6th. And the co-authors join us now. Investigative reporter for the Washington Post and MSNBC contributor Carol Leonnig, and senior Washington correspondent for the Washington Post and political analyst for MSNBC and NBC News, Philip Rucker, joins us. And you both actually traveled at Donald Trump's invitation to Mar-a-Lago to speak with the former president. Among the many questions you asked concerned the events at the Capitol on January 6th, and you write in part this: I would venture to say I think it was the largest crowd I had ever spoken to before, Trump said. It was a loving crowd, too, by the way. There was a lot of love. In all fairness, the Capitol Police were ushering people in, Trump said. The Capitol Police were very friendly. They were hugging and kissing. You don't see that. There's plenty of tape on that. Okay, I don't even know where to begin, but why don't we back up? And Carol, if you could fill us in on why you think he invited you to Mar-a-Lago and allowed you guys to sit down and talk to him about all of this.
You know, Mika, I think that Phil and I both recognize, as you do, because of how long you've been chronicling this presidency, that Donald Trump loves an audience. And when we were coming to see him, he had really been stripped of some of his opportunities and audiences. No longer was he on the South Lawn talking to reporters every morning. He was off Twitter. And honestly, he wanted to get across his version of reality to us. And as he said, get the word out. Many of the things he said to us do not square with reality and do not square with the evidence that we have and facts that we've done in our reporting. But Donald Trump wants that alternate reality out there, and he wants to explain to the public that he really didn't lose, that he won Arizona and Pennsylvania and Michigan. He wants people to believe that the January 6th riot was a peaceful, loving event in which his supporters were just basically great, loving people. We all know that what we saw, which was that rioters were slamming flagpoles and batons and bear spray at police officers, and some of them died that day or the next day.
And Phil, when he said things like that, did you all push him? Did you say, with all due respect, that is exactly not what happened? People died, and this was an insurrection, among many other things. I mean, what was the conversation like, or was he allowed to just talk?
You know, Mika, we pushed him repeatedly in a number of different areas, including about his allegations of voter fraud. this is 2 months after he left office, and he was still filled with grievance about the fraud that he believes existed, or at least that he tries to persuade his supporters existed, when there's no evidence for it whatsoever. We also asked him why, as president, he thought it was okay for him to continually tell the American people things that were not true, to lie again and again and again. And he said to us, there's a beautiful word, and it's called disinformation.
Hey, Carol, it's Willie. Congratulations, guys, on this book, which is just one scoop after another. I'm reading your piece in Vanity Fair that chronicles your interview on March 31st when you went down to Mar-a-Lago and sat with former President Trump. I'll begin at the end where he says, I actually enjoyed this. For some sick reason, I enjoyed it. Speaking of your interview. Carol, he goes through just about anybody you could criticize and criticizes them, down to, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan, John McCain. We've heard these insults before. But what is your sense of why he wanted to sit with you for as long as he did, and what he needed to get into the record, despite, he always does this, his protest that you guys are unfair and that your previous book was fake news, etc.?
Willie, I'm really glad you asked that question, and that final moment is one of our favorite as well. I mean, the former president is really actually being pretty aware of himself at that moment by saying, I am addicted to your questions and your attention. It is a sickness in some respects. However, I would argue that part of the reason he sat with us for so long is because we were eager to hear his explanations. We were eager to hear his narrative of this incredible, consequential, and ultimately catastrophic year. We wanted him to have a chance to explain that. And mostly what he talked about is how often people around him failed him. I mean, he believes Bill Barr was addicted to the media and too weak to resist the criticism that he was facing, and that's why Bill Barr failed him. He argued that Mitch McConnell was stupid and lacked personality, and that this was a huge sort of yoke around his neck to have a Republican leader who was so fair to middling, I guess I'd say. The next thing that he argued was that Pence, his vice president, was weak and could have done more to protect the Constitution if he had followed Donald Trump's words. Now, of course, a lot of people will disagree with the president about this, but I think it's so interesting. His narrative is basically that he alone was the brilliant genius and everyone else was an enemy or a weak, paltry stand-in.
And here's what President Trump told you guys, quote, had Mike Pence had the courage to send it back to the legislatures, you would have had a different outcome, in my opinion. I think the Vice President of the United States must protect the Constitution of the United States. I don't believe he's just supposed to be a statue who gets these votes from the states and immediately hands them over. If you see fraud, then I believe you have an obligation to do one of a number of things. End quote from former President Trump. Phil, many people would say that Mike Pence did defend the Constitution that day, at least in that moment. President Trump, in your interview, also criticizes Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, saying he didn't do enough. He goes after Chris Christie. He says Nikki Haley put out some nasty statements. I mean, the island is really shrinking around him. It's down to about Rudy Giuliani, Kevin McCarthy, and some immediate family members. But you guys have a passage in here in this Vanity Fair piece about President Trump committing to the lies with a straight face. And I encourage everybody to read this piece because, my goodness, he goes off on every conspiracy theory. I mean, if you had someone in your family speaking the way he speaks to you, you'd call an emergency meeting and say there's something wrong with Dad. What is your sense of whether he actually believes the garbage he's spewing, or he needs it to be out there to tell himself, or at least to tell his supporters, that he did win?
You know, Willie, it's hard for us as journalists to get inside the head of Donald Trump, but he repeats these lies again and again so often that they might be true in his mind. And when you're down there talking to him, there's a distorted reality that he's presenting, not only to us, but to the dozens of guests that come to Mar-a-Lago every night for dinner and give him a standing ovation out on the patio at sunset. I mean, it's a really strange scene down there. And then you leave Mar-a-Lago and you realize what's happening in the world, the reality is completely different from what the 45th president is trying to tell his millions of supporters. And that's what's so dangerous for the country, because so many Americans still continue to believe what Donald Trump is telling them. And in our book, we interviewed more than 140 senior officials in the government, advisors to the former president, witnesses to these events. And again, they told us about how concerned and alarmed they were by what the president was doing and saying in office, especially in those harrowing final weeks after the election and before Joe Biden's inauguration.
So, guys, I'm just listening in my mind and imagining that scene of him getting that standing O at Mar-a-Lago, which he gets for himself whenever he wants it, and thinking of Kevin McCarthy going to visit him and these leaders in Washington who follow him, who fear him. And I've made this point before earlier this week. This doesn't feel like a cult. This appears to be a cult. How would you describe the relationship between Trump and his followers, especially given the sort of color that you're telling us about from in your incredible book?
Mika, I'm so glad you fix on that issue of the parade of people that we watched come in to sort of kiss the ring of Donald Trump months after he has, lost the election. So many Republican congressmen are coming to Mar-a-Lago to basically get his endorsement, his stamp of approval, because they know what we all are watching in front of our eyes, that so many Americans still cheer for Donald Trump. As we like to say, if a primary were held today, he would probably be the Republican nominee for president. He is the standard bearer right now and the most prominent Republican. Voters who supported him believe the wall-to-wall basic coverage of his comments and believe that COVID is not as bad as people say because he said so. Believe masks don't work because he rejected them. Believe that the election was stolen because he repeatedly said so and continues to do so.
It is Tuesday, the 20th of July of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and that is the history, no matter what Texas says, no matter. Well, speaking of Texas, Jeff Bezos is blasting off into space, or is it really space? Probably not. Suborbital. They're only going to do as much, actually a lot less, than what Alan Shepard did. Just saying. And Alan Shepard, who went before John Glenn, everybody says John Glenn because he orbited. Well, Alan Shepard went into, almost a suborbital thing because he didn't quite orbit. And he came back down and survived. And that was a big deal. So, he was the first into, quote, space, but John Glenn orbited. Let us just remember that. Okay. And we were in a race with Russia. Well, the Soviet Union, but Russia controlled everything because they always have and always will, almost like hot Hungarian smoked paprika. Alrighty. Hey, yeah, we have a disjointed show today. Do we? No, we don't. We have a curated show. This is the disjointed part. What I like to affectionately call free form. Because all of a sudden, you think that you have a curated show, and all of a sudden there's this news that just pops up. And I'm opening it up right now and just reminding myself of some of the little tidbits that caught my eye. And, of course, we're reminded of all sorts of little things that we already knew, like Lewandowski coming out and admitting, yeah, Trump hires actors. Like, we never knew that. We never saw the casting calls because none of us have ever had one before. Jeez. All right. They think we're stupid as they are. They really do. We got MAGA rioters claiming sovereign citizen status, that you don't have control over me. I am me. You can't control me. Okay, sure. Our laws don't apply to you. We'll show you what it's like. You know, it's like sovereign citizenship is like being on LSD. And for those of you who don't know, what I've read is that you can think you can fly, but don't try it, okay? Really. One of the main takeaways from that, and the MAGA rioters could have taken this to heart, do not make any long-term decisions while under the influence of any kind of psychotropic drug. You don't do it, okay? How many people got married under the influence of ecstasy and they woke up 3 days later and realized what the hell they just did? Even before the drug was developed. What the hell did I just do? And then you're stuck. Because long-term decisions are long-term decisions, and sometimes they're final. All right? And these MAGA rioters could have taken that to heart. It looked like enough of them, well, they were old enough to know. But they didn't. Because everybody says, oh, the boomer this, the boomer that. No, the same people that were in the MAGA rioter constituency were the same ones giving us grief back in the day, mucking up the works, mocking everything that we did. All right? And now they have some outsized power. Yes, they do. To the point that they can tell you with a bald-faced, I like that. Is it bald-faced? Anyway, in complete belief that Trump has nothing to do with nobody wanting to wear masks. Trump doesn't have anything to do with no one wanting to take the vaccine. Trump doesn't have anything to do with this. Trump doesn't have anything to do with that. You're the one that's delusional. Ugh. Okay, I'm serious. The gated communities are already built for them, and many of them already live there. Why don't we just lock them in? Jeez, privatize the gated communities and then nationalize them. And then we have our own. Well, they're not icebox baby gulags. Maybe we can call them mega mansion gulags. And they'll love it. They have their own malls, their own fingernail places, but who's going to work there? Well, I don't know. Maybe it will be a growth industry for America. To denazify America, maybe we need to start quarantining some of the people who have been infected by a dread disease. Yeah. Well, we're not the Nazis, okay? And don't turn us into Pol Pot. Just saying. No, let's not do that. Pol Pot was as idiotic in his sense. This was Mao. The whole anti-intellectual gambit is not relegated to a spectrum of the political spectrum. Because left or right, they do look at the people who have some critical thinking skills as being the great threat because they cannot be brainwashed. Lucky for us, we have about 80 some odd million who, and that's just the ones who were able to vote. So I like to think it's much more than that. 80, 100 million, we'll say, who actually have some pretty good critical thinking skills. And then you have like 70 some million. It might be lower because those people hardly ever vote. So I'm just saying. Anyway, I like to think that they're a much smaller number, like a third. Okay? You know what they said about Nazi Germany, you know, it's like a third, you know, wanted to send everybody other than them to the ovens. Another third said, okay, we're not going to put up with that and we're going to fight it. And another third said, yeah, we don't care. Give us our beer. And a mule. Whatever it was. How about the Autobahn? Yeah, okay. See, Trump's gambit failed because he wasn't able to build the Autobahn, because Eisenhower already built our interstate highways, that socialist pig. So Trump couldn't spend the 3 years rebuilding the U.S. infrastructure. Okay, it would be rebuilding, shoring it up. He could have done that. Now he wanted to build a wall, and how much of that wall was actually built, and why is it there to begin with? Well, that's a story unto itself. And growth industries find themselves wherever they find themselves. That's why I'm saying we could just rehab these gated communities and they would love it. We'd be able to put them in there, start teaching them a little bit about civics and responsibility. Like the more money you make is maybe not a reason to get more lazy. Jeez. Yeah, and I got to tell you, buying a boat that you don't know how to handle, or you're going to ignore the laws of the sea in any waterway. Because bad things can happen, not only to other people, but to you. Okay, that's the only thing they care about. They don't care about what happens to other people, only what happens to them. I've already got the virus. I'm totally immune. I don't need to wear a mask. I don't need to take the shot. I don't need to do this. Yeah, well, you're still infectious, so get out of here. Enough of that. What do we have on the curated part of the show? Because we do have a show. And, let me assure folks, for some reason, and knock on wood, the terrible wildfires that seem to be fairly nearby, the prevailing winds have, at least in our little burg of Rogue River, we've been fairly protected. We did have a couple of smoke days that weren't as bad as we've had in wildfires past. But the bootleg and log fire have merged, as they say, and making its own weather. And we don't like that. Apparently there is some rain up in Lake County, and that might be helpful. And as we get into our general weather part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, we'll speak more about temperatures and humidity. But we're keeping our fingers crossed, hoping maybe some sea air might come in and cool things off. That would be nice. Well, we'll get into that later, because what do we have here curated for you in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, Donald Trump wants that alternative reality out there because it's real to him, whether we like it or not. All right, and people are going up and kissing his ring. Well, that's how you can tell they're a family, isn't it? They decided, you know what? Seems to have worked for Michael Corleone. Let's see if it works for us. Only thing is, Michael Corleone actually knew what he was doing. Did he? Well, that's the scary part, isn't it? On the rest of the menu, Andy Biggs, another one of those insurgent electeds, is outraged that the Biden administration seized massive amounts of drugs at the border. I don't get these people. Well, I do. I know exactly what they're doing, but they're idiots. I guess that's by definition, isn't it? Marjorie Taylor Greene, another one of those insurgent electeds, newly elected, says the church is basically dead in the U.S. because it's not right-wing enough. Well, maybe her church. The rest of our churches, well, I don't know. We do have the Opus Dei part of, or as some people call the American bishops. Yeah, well, there is that. And a Tucker Carlson Fox News-hyped study calling masks harmful to kids has been retracted from the Journal of the American Medical Association over obvious scientific issues. Obvious. Coming from Fox, they're not there to tell the truth. They're a propaganda outfit, and they've defended themselves thusly in court. Do not ever forget that. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where far-right British commentator Katie Hopkins was deported from Australia after boasting that she planned to breach the country's quarantine rules. And popular Greek folk singer, songwriter, and actor Tolis Voskopoulos, whose career spanned more than 6 decades, has died at age 80. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and she's pretty busy now in real life, and also real life entails Netroots Nation, so look forward to that. And thank you, Kelly, for all that you do. If you would like to then gaze across our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the left, there is the link to our Patreon site, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, as others have, and if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars with what we have in our own wallets, and then we fund this little powerhouse of resistance that has been a resistance of, well, powerhouse resistance, a little one, for over 10 years now. We're in our 10th year anniversary of continuous 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio, because that's who we are. And thank you for your generosity, and thank you in advance for considering being ever so generous to us, because it doesn't come cheap. I gotta tell you, these bills keep going up. I was wondering how come everything kept going up, and then I realized, we got billionaires going into suborbital space for a joyride. Well, that's fine. They can afford it because we're paying for it one way or another. Anyway, thank you for helping us, well, counterweight all of that, because Okay. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And thank you and Kelly for everything that you do. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, I would suggest you do, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Put that up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Oh, Zuckerberg, you. And that's what I do. So there. The show notes and links are very important because by their mere definition, they're show notes and links. And you'll need those. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Everywhere. Okay. Oh, boy. Well, it's starting the week. It's always starting the week. And then you're in the middle of the week, and then you're going, we're getting close to the weekend, which we can look forward to. Remember when we couldn't do that? I want to forget, to a degree, how terrible it was when the weekends came up. Because before, the weekends were always a little, oasis, an island in time that you could look forward to. And then when it was there, you could enjoy. And we can do that once again. Well, the plane of existence seems to be balancing out, as they say. Emily Singer brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Oh, one other tidbit of information. There's always roasted corn in the chowder. Always. Back to the article at hand. Representative Andy Biggs questioned why the Biden administration seizing large amounts of the potent drug fentanyl at the border had not created more outrage in the media, suggesting it was somehow proof of a dire and threatening situation. Oh my God. Caravans of fentanyl showed up at the border and the Biden administration stopped them. Okay. All right. Well, after what the Sacklers have done, I suppose, that's just old news. Come on. Under Joe Biden, enough fentanyl to kill 238 million Americans was seized at the southern border last month, Biggs tweeted yesterday afternoon, Monday. Where's the outrage in the media? Why would there be outrage? That's a good thing. Why are you upset that Joe was able to stop a bunch of drugs that could kill, by your own assessment, 238 million people? On the other hand, I suppose the Sacklers made as much to kill, 10 times that amount? And it's still out there. Maybe it's coming back. It is true that border agents are seizing larger amounts of fentanyl, a potent opioid, at the border, but it's unclear why. Biggs believes those agents preventing large quantities of the potentially deadly drug from being illegally smuggled into the U.S. constitutes a crisis. Well, I know why. Because he thinks they can turn it into some sort of insult. We have a drug crisis, and this is proof we're stopping the drugs at the border. Really? Because up is down and down is up in these people's minds. Okay. We can joke around that maybe Biggs has some sort of connection with the cartels. But look, we have the know-nothings running everything now, and they think they know everything. And they do, even when they make it up. They know it. Biggs is a part of a large contingent of Republicans pushing claims of a border crisis, which experts say does not actually exist. And they're doing that, of course, ahead of the 2022 midterms. And whether that message helps the GOP at the ballot box remains to be seen. In the 2018 midterm elections, Republicans waged a similarly racist and xenophobic effort to scare voters about a caravan of immigrants making their way to the U.S. Oh, caravans of fentanyl. Once again, we're going to have caravans of drugs coming to the border, and somehow Joe Biden stopping them is a bad thing. Well, don't worry about it, Andy. We're holding those drugs in an icebox baby gulag pharmacy. Oliver Willis of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Marjorie Taylor Greene told a congregation on Sunday that the church is basically dead in America because Christian churches have not been vocal enough in their support for right-wing policies. Really? Okay, let's hear what she has to say. Greene made her remarks in a church, or in a speech to the 412 or the 412 Murrieta Church in Murrieta, California. I believe 412 is the area code. I don't know, maybe not. The church, led by Pastor Tim Thompson, recently hosted sermons on the sin of homosexuality, and referred to activism against climate change as the sin of earth worship. You know, like witches. Only witches care about the earth. The church also attacked vaccination from COVID-19 with the video of the sermon against vaccination now removed from YouTube for violating the site's community guidelines. In May of 2020, the church held services at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in violation of state regulations enacted to stop the spread of the virus, but they are bioterrorists. Okay, on Sunday, Greene praised 412 Marietta for their conservative activism, but lamented that other Christian churches have not followed their model because 412 Marietta is a church of heretics, Marjorie, like you are. Okay? Don't push us. Really. The church all over America is silent. Our church is complacent. Our church is not the living, breathing body of Christ. The church is basically dead. Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe your church should be. Greene also said that the purported silence of churches on conservative social issues is also why we're living in a country that is destroying what is moral and right. Greene cited transgender rights and complained that transgenders go into women's bathrooms and girls' bathrooms and sports, rape centers and jails. Rape centers? Just throw that in. Yeah, that's just something from way back. Oh, yeah, the rape centers. What? She also complained that transgender people, who she described as a biological man in a dress, had their rights above ours, a practice she described as evil. Greene has frequently advocated against transgender rights. In February, she spoke on the floor of the House in opposition to the Equality Act, inaccurately describing the legislation that would add LGBTQ protections to federal law as causing discrimination against women and religious freedom. She's complaining because she wants a church that has a religious right to bigotry. Garden Schwartz of the American Independent brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A study pushed by the conservative-leaning Fox News, which claimed face masks were harmful to children, has been retracted over concerns about its validity and scientific research methods. The study was promoted on Fox News host Tucker Carlson's popular nightly program. Carlson began his nightly cable program on July 1st, as he often does these days, with a screed against public health measures implemented to keep Americans safe during the pandemic. Policies calling for mask wearing among unvaccinated children are a complete disaster, Carlson told his audience of over 3 million viewers. Of youth mask mandates, he added, it is a human tragedy, in fact, on a vast scale, and it is a living testament to the recklessness of our leaders. Carlson then pointed to a new research letter in the prestigious pediatrics publication of the Journal of the American Medical Association, which claimed there was evidence of increased levels of inhaled carbon dioxide among children who wore face masks. That letter has since been pulled. JAMA rejected the study on Friday, posting a short editor's note which identified numerous scientific issues with it, including methodological problems and concerns about the validity of the study conclusions. Given fundamental concerns about the study methodology, uncertainty regarding the validity of the findings and conclusions, and the potential public health implications, the editors have retracted this research letter, a JAMA editor wrote. But by that time, the idea that there was supposed proof of the dangers of youth mask wearing had already taken off, spreading across conservative news sites and on social media, where articles about it received tens of thousands of interactions. According to data from the monitoring platform CrowdTangle, when I saw that this translated to people literally saying that the American Medical Association, kind of the country's most reputable medical brand, is saying masks are not safe, that's when I realized how pervasive the misinformation is. Dr. Kavita Patel, a primary care physician who served as an advisor to former President Barack Obama's administration on health policy matters, said in a phone interview, representatives from Fox did not respond to an inquiry about the retraction and whether the new information contradicting Carlson's conclusions would be relayed to Carlson's audience, but we already know where that would go. If they ever did issue a retraction, it would only be because their lawyers talked to them, which apparently they talked to Sean Hannity last night. He was out there, oh yeah, take the vaccine. Take it. You got to take it. It's safe. Will Tucker Carlson be issuing the same edict? No. Tucker's not there to tell the truth. Tucker is a carnival barker, and they love him just fine. Well, we don't. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, No Child Left Behind. Warning, spoilers in the second minute. Black Widow takes place in 2016 after Avengers Age of Ultron and Captain America Civil War. Ultron has annihilated Sokovia, and Natasha's surrogate family, the Avengers, have broken up over the Sokovia Accords, set up to regulate people with powers. Most of her fellow anti-Accords Avengers are in jail, and Natasha, played by Scarlett Johansson, as if you didn't know, is alone and on the run. It is then that Nat is contacted by her younger sister Yelena, played by Almost Steals the Movie Florence Pugh. Nat has put her sister out of her life both physically and emotionally, but Yelena has news. Natasha failed to destroy the Red Room, the evil secret Russian program that turned little girls into deadly spies. Little girls like Nat and Yelena, who were given over to the Red Room by their parents. However, where Nat was psychologically conditioned to serve the horrid General Dreykov, Dreykov has chemically brainwashed Yelena and other modern-day widows. Yelena has the chemical antidote, has taken it, gives it over to Natasha, and the two must reunite with their estranged parents to find the Red Room and end Dreykov's reign of widow subjugation and global assassination. Now you would think that Black Widow is a movie about family. After all, Hollywood loves making films about the family in jeopardy. They love it. However, gratefully, refreshingly, thank Godingly, Black Widow is much more nuanced than that overworked motif. Black Widow is about how important it is to care for other people and to be cared for by other people. And in this movie, caring means not abandoning people when they need you. That's why the final skydive sequence has thematic significance as well as action spectacle. Yelena falls in sacrifice, but Nat throws herself to catch her. Cool, but Nat's arc is not complete until she bemoans having left Yelena to her Red Room fate and acknowledges their sisterly bond. In a time when a chemical vaccine is freeing us from subjugation by a biological agent, how apropos for Black Widow to talk about reaching out to our loved ones and to not leave them behind. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Morning in Tanzania. The sun rises over the Ngorongoro crater. The spotted hyenas are beginning their day, while Yves Davidian from Germany's Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research sits nearby in a truck, watching and waiting. The most exciting part of her day is when a male hyena crouches on his hind legs to poop.
So I did collect a lot of fecal samples, monitor a lot of behaviors, spend a lot of time following males on site in Tanzania in the field.
Biologists have been monitoring the 8 hyena clans of Tanzania's Ngorongoro crater for 25 years. They've learned a lot about the species, but there are still some outstanding mysteries.
Why is it that high-ranking individuals, and in particular high-ranking males, often are more successful than low-ranking males in terms of reproduction? In spotted hyenas, in contrast to many other mammals, males don't fight to access a high social rank, and they also don't fight to access breeding partners. And so it is quite puzzling why high-ranking males, if they don't fight and they are not necessarily more attractive to females, why they should be more successful than males of lower social rank.
In all, Davidian had nearly 400 fecal samples collected from 120 male hyenas. She analyzed the hormones inside of them and discovered that interactions among male hyenas were more stressful for lower-ranking males. And as a result, they spent more time alone. The results were published in the journal Functional Ecology.
And the consequence of that is that low-ranking males, they spend less time courting females and are therefore less successful in terms of the number of offspring they produce compared to high-ranking males who spend most of their time courting females.
All that time spent alone recovering from stress means that the lower-ranking hyenas aren't spending their time courting females. And the females that they do manage to spend time with are themselves also of lower rank. The researchers think it has to do with the fact that lower-ranking males tend to be newcomers within hyena clans. It takes time to develop their support networks among other males.
They do have to spend a lot of time building up and maintaining these relationships before they can even think about courting females.
So for male spotted hyenas, it might be that the best path towards romance is to begin with a bromance. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Do you know that the United States has been deporting veterans who served honorably in the military? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth, who lost her legs in service for her country flying combat missions in Iraq, a woman who clearly knows something about patriotism and sacrifice, also knows that some women and men who have served honorably in the military in Iraq and elsewhere have been undocumented, and then, after serving honorably in the military, have been deported. Senator Duckworth recently issued a report titled Immigrant Veterans, Deported by the Same Nation They Sacrificed to Defend. The senator's report cites the cases of 92 vets deported between 2013 and 2018, and she says the number could be much higher. To the question with which we began this Civil Liberties Minute, did you know? Senator Duckworth said in a recent interview with the New York Times, "People don't even know that we are deporting veterans. People assume that when they serve, they gain American citizenship." Not so. While there are executive orders, laws, and policies that can give veterans their status, these rules are often not followed, and some veterans have learned that their paperwork is not in order only when they are being handed over to ICE. To the good, the Biden administration has announced plans to provide medical and other support for deported veterans and to try to return some eligible veterans who have been deported. But, as the senator points out, it is still critical that Congress change the laws that allow these injustices to happen. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that came to be known as Bloody Friday. Minneapolis Teamsters had been on strike for 3 days in their third strike of the year. Trucking bosses had reneged on their May settlement. They refused to recognize union organization of inside workers. In the period between strikes, the union had documented hundreds of cases of discrimination. Now, 7,000 Teamsters effectively shut down trucking throughout the city. Local 574 leaders established a daily strike bulletin. The organizer, as it was called, would serve to guide strikers to victory. In his book, Revolutionary Teamsters, historian Brian Palmer notes that the first few days of the strike had been quiet. Then, on this day, police attempted to break the picket lines by running what seemed to be a lone scab truck through the lines. It was later discovered the truck was moving no merchandise, but was used to draw strikers into a confrontation. When flying pickets moved to stop the truck, they were ambushed. Police opened fire on unarmed picketers and then sprayed those who attempted to escape with buckshot. At least 48 were wounded. Striker Harry Ness and unemployed council supporter John Beller were killed. Palmer notes that Ness had been shot point blank in the chest. Doctors pulled 38 slugs from his body. His deathbed injunction repeated word of mouth among the strikers, "Tell the boys not to fail me now." More than 40,000 turned out to pay their respects to the World War I veteran and father of 4. Palmer adds that Bloody Friday had lasted a matter of minutes, but its meaning would leave a mark on the very fabric of Minneapolis's socio-economic relations. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh my. Expecting a high of only the upper 80s to the low 90s. We can only hope. Winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Generally clear tonight with lows in the mid 50s. That it will be nice. Winds out of the northwest will continue at a steady clip of 10 to 15 miles per hour, which is not good for the wildfires. We want those winds to be decreased somewhat. Mainly sunny tomorrow with highs even lower in the mid-80s. Let's hope so. Winds will be decreasing at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And it looks like we will have some days here in the low to mid-80s for a few days at least. Keeping our fingers crossed. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have been updated and have increased precipitously as expected. We now stand at 119,059 confirmed cases, with deceased now standing at 149. Grass pollen is rated high in the Rogue River city itself, which is really a town. The air quality index for the region is good at 24 parts per million in spite spite of the smoke that is in the area just south of us. And the daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.13 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 70%. Probably going to go down again to the 40s, which we need our humidity to go up as well. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 86 and partly cloudy. Paris is 84 and sunny. Rome is 87 and sunny. Kyiv is 80 degrees and fair. Kabul is 77 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 77 with a light rain. Tokyo is 80 degrees and fair. Sydney, Australia is 52 and partly cloudy. San Francisco is 55 and partly cloudy. And New York is a bright 80 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Far-right British commentator Katie Hopkins was deported from Australia late yesterday, Monday, after she boasted on social media that she planned to breach the country's quarantine rules. Hopkins traveled to Australia to appear in a reality television program and was in a 14-day mandatory hotel quarantine in Sydney before filming was to start. Her flight to Australia last week created outrage after the government halved the number of Australian citizens and permanent residents allowed to return home each week to 3,000 to try to reduce the risk of COVID-19 leaking from hotel quarantine. More than 34,000 Australians who want to come home remain stranded overseas.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tolis Voskopoulos, a popular Greek folk singer, songwriter, and actor whose career spanned more than 6 decades, has died. He was 80. Voskopoulos, considered a star of modern Greek folk music, died yesterday, Monday, in an Athens hospital of cardiac arrest, a few days shy of his 81st birthday and several weeks after being hospitalized with respiratory problems. Tolis Voskopoulos was fortunate to be appreciated by his colleagues and adored by the public, Culture Minister Lina Mendoni said in a statement. He was a true popular idol, a talented, intelligent performer who created a different, particular kind of entertainment on the stage. He lived as he sang as he lived, and in the same way he left, unrepeatable, as his melodic lyrics will say forever, tweeted Prime Minister Mitsotakis, using the title of one of Voskopoulos' songs. Born in Greece in the main port city of Piraeus on July 26th of 1940 to parents who were refugees from Asia Minor, he was the youngest of 12 children and the only boy He began his career as an actor, first appearing on stage at age 18 in 1953, and made his film debut a few years later in 1963. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.